ghostly mark. Cobwebs twine and shadows dance in this twilight somber trance. Candles flicker, weary wicks, ancient echoes, time's cruel tricks. Marble figures, frozen pose, amidst the silence sorrow grows. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room. Chandeliers and crystal tears reflect forgotten yesteryears, softly chanting distant cries. Through the arches sorrow sighs. Gargoyles watch with stony gaze, guardians of endless maze. Pipe organ's breath begins to rise, filling air with mournful ties. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Lady Red of the Black Pants Legion doing the thing, and with any luck, everything is working. And yes, we can see the screen and all of the nonsense. No plan this week, winging it, but I was rather sensible and didn't decide to fly alone, and I stole Aiden again. Say hi, Aiden.
Hi, Aiden.
Good job. Well done. How are you doing this week, chat? Have you had a good week? Yes, we are just going to wing that, Mother. It's been a week. The great and cleaning for the big move has begun. I smell of bleach. My living room is an absolute state. The dogs are confused, and I have no brain.
I similarly have zero brain because I currently smell of puppies, poop, and dirt because wrangling the little ones to keep them out from underfoot during the cleaning is a full-time job all its own.
It is, though it's going to get a little bit easier very soon because this weekend Lupa heads to Texas. She's off to the ranch. Maura from the ranch will be joining us on Saturday evening and staying the night, and then on Sunday she's going on an aeroplane, which will be very exciting and possibly quite scary for her, but she should be okay. She's a brave girl. She is the bestest girl.
She really is. I'm gonna miss her something dearly, though.
Yeah, she is a precious little girl, and we are definitely gonna miss her. Lupa de Loop. I call her Lupa Loo to get her attention, and I've just said her name and she's looking at me. She's very cutely curled up with her sister at the moment. They are being absolutely precious. We might try to get just a little bit of pup cam before the end of stream if Aiden's willing. But right now they're having a nice nap, so we're going to leave them be. Seems like some of you have had a good week, or at least a decent enough week. That's good. I'm glad. Turned out to be a good day. I've been told my face wound is now healed enough to be left uncovered. I'm very glad, Wilf, and please no wound to the face again. No face wounds. That's bad for you.
Yeah, no, just yeah, what she said.
Yeah. So, as I said, I've got nothing specific planned for the first half of stream this week. If any of you have any questions, queries, or writing topics you want to discuss, please do let me know in chat, and I'll be happy to ramble about them. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll find something off of our own back. There is a world of things that I have opinions about in writing, but I'm always interested to see what you guys find interesting and compelling and want to chat about. So we'll start there if anybody has anything. It's been a long week, many things happened, but we still live in. That's some weeks that's, more than enough. You did enough.
Ah, Wilf, I am familiar with this feeling.
Would you like to tell the story of you and your bike?
I mean, I wasn't going to tell the whole story. I was just going to say that I too have dabbled in experimentation with unpowered human flight from a vehicular base. It resulted in what I believe to be a concussion and a big old bloody spot on my shoulder, but my good old friend Concrete was there to catch me as I fell.
Gravity and Concrete are great friends. They're always there for you.
Yes. Yeah, that happened back in college.
Some moons
it's been a
ago at
while.
this point.
Yeah.
Flying is fun from time to time, only if you aim at the ground and miss. If you actually make acquaintance with the ground, it's not quite so fun. First time chat from Arc Prime. Hello, welcome in. Glad to see you. Please do come and join the Discord. The Orcs is a fun time. It's all madness over there, and your madness should interact with our madness. It'll be a wonderful, wonderful time. Concrete Chan is always there for you. Don't say that in front of Night Owl. I'm sure we'll get more memes.
Oh boy.
Alright. Is there anything in particular you guys want to talk about writing-wise this week? Otherwise, I'm probably going to pull a topic out of thin air and we'll see where we go from there. But if anybody has anything specific they're interested in, do let me know.
Freestyle the conversation.
The Orcs, because none of us are as dumb as all of us. Very true, Wilf.
Fact.
Earthnoid souls are weighed down by gravity. Yeah. I've made many meetings with the ground. It likes me. Dragons and undead? You want to talk about dragons and the undead? Or dragons and also the undead? Not at the same time.
But what about undead dragons?
I mean, undead dragons are a cool type of dragon, and there is a lot to be said for appropriate use of dragons in media. Undead dragons, says Dr. Waffles. Okay.
Dr. Waffles. So I'm gonna open it then with the
FromSoft?
question. No, I wasn't
Okay.
gonna touch on FromSoft actually. So this has happened to multiple kinds of undead actually. Oversaturation. Because we had, starting from Twilight, the thorough oversaturation of the vampire market. We've had more zombie books and movies in a very small amount of time than I could possibly begin to list. So, given how much undead have really become a commonplace thing, how do you make a undead character or the undead part of a setting without just feeling like you're struggling to get out from under the thumb of, I don't know, fucking The Walking Dead, for example?
So that's definitely a topic that you've brought up there, and a complex one. And I have ideas and thoughts and opinions. So
Well, we were fishing for a
yes,
subject to make the next hour disappear, so
settle in, get a drink. We could be here for a while because I have opinions.
Orc Slayer, you are correct. A lot of
Twilight
what
is
happened in
terrible.
the well, yeah, that and during the oversaturation times, there's just most of it was not great quality.
So, I'm going to work through some thoughts here, and I'm sure Aiden will interrupt me as appropriate. But the initial problem that you're talking about,
Interrupting is rude, though.
yes, but
He says,
it's
interrupting.
allowed in this. The core of the problem that you've brought up here is it's not an issue of topic, it's an issue of soulless corporatization of media. And the issues stem from somebody writes or creates or makes something new that is compelling to an audience. And usually that core original thing will be compelling to an audience because it broaches something that's either topical or in the current zeitgeist or just some fundamental part of the human condition, which is, you know, kind of what we use. That's the point of art, is it allows us to explore the human condition and what it is to be alive, and all of that fun stuff I've gone on about in plenty of other streams. So you start out with an original, creative, and interesting concept, and it's one of the reasons why the undead are so compelling, is because we are all aware that at some point we're going to die. It's not guaranteed what day it will be on, what manner it will come, but every single one of us at some point will unfortunately pass on. What happens next, what the meaning of that is, why death has to be a thing, all of these little things are part of the act of being alive, and being sapient, having that awareness of your own existence and your own mortality. So things like the undead allow you to deal with the scariness of death, the uncertainty, the philosophical questions of what if we had a world without death, the concept of life being this precious thing that's more than just the time that we have on Earth. It's also somehow, in many stories, more of a fundamental, ephemeral, esoteric thing that's built into us that, if you elongate it by having immortality, becomes corrupted and evil and wrong. These are all huge thoughts that, you know, most people will at least spend some time considering at some level at some time in their life. So that there are really good stories to be told there, and that's where it all starts. You get these really good stories that resonate, that have a meaning, that have a message, that have a theme, and they do really well. And then the soulless corporation, whose sole job is to make money, comes along and goes, how do we replicate that? And they don't say, by looking for a theme of our own, or by using this medium to look at something that the original didn't do. They go by copying. And that's not to say that that's always what happens. There are times that corporations get involved and they push things to new heights or take them further than they should be. But in the current day, I feel like that's a lot more rare. And you get a lot more of the soulless monetization and copying. Then that leads you into your oversaturation, because you've got, you know, original thing was good, and now you've got 5 different companies all going, oh, how can we make that? And now you've gone from having 1 of the thing to 6 of the thing, and you haven't added to the formula, you haven't added to the message, the theme, the connection, the conversation, and that's what drags you down into the dirt. And the further and further you go, the worse. It's like photocopying a photograph, and then photocopying the photocopy, and photocopying the photocopy, and photocopying the photocopy. It just gets worse with time.
Or it's like the observation, I think it was last week, that was made about AI and AI art. Actually, no, I think this was during Crispy's stream when you were guest starring on.
Yeah, so we were talking about the homogenization, and that because it feeds into itself, it innately lessens itself because the idea pool it's drawing from is completely stagnant.
It's somebody in chat at the time commented that it was very much the Ouroboros continuously eating its own tail. I likened it more to being inbred. It's Habsburg's machine.
Yes.
So now comes the question then, because I'm seeing some comments in chat that there are diamonds in the rough in the oversaturated markets that you see. I mean, whether it's vampire, zombies, somebody pointed out, I think it was Wilf, that superhero media has become massively overdone in the last decade, which ever since the MCU really kicked off, hard agree. There was some gold there, and then it has just been overplayed and overplayed.
So talking about the superheroes leads into the second point I was going to make, but I'll let you finish first.
Okay. So I guess the question is, what do you need to do to differentiate to make a story in an oversaturated market that actually is
Let me
decent?
finish with my second thought
Go
first,
for
and
it.
I'll come back to it because it's good. Doing things in order will make it more relevant. So the initial thing is corporate soullessness that oversaturates the market. And the other problem that comes in, and this in particular with the superheroes is relevant, is because of that money-making idea, and this even goes outside of corporates to, for example, Stephanie Meyer was not a trained author looking to go down the standard publishing route when she put out Twilight. For all I think Twilight is a complete piece of garbage, that she would have benefited from going on some writing courses before she wrote it. The characters are terrible, the theming is terrible. I hate Twilight to its core. I don't blame Stephanie Meyer for writing it, because she initially kind of wrote it for herself and then put it out there and it got popular. And the one thing she's done that a lot of other bad authors haven't is she's accepted the criticism that she's been given. She hasn't taken it on board and learnt from it, which is its own issue, but she's always accepted it. She's never turned around and said, well, people who criticize me are wrong. She's turned around and said, if you don't like my writing, that's fine. For everybody it resonated with, I'm very grateful. And that's a really important thing. And it was the publishing house that picked it up and saw it got popular, and then Stephanie Meyer herself, seeing the money she made from it, went, well, I guess I should write another one. I guess I should write another one. And then once she became completely creatively bankrupt, I guess I should write the same one again from a different perspective and make it worse somehow. But again, that's another rant all its own. And the issue that you're hitting on there goes hand in hand with corporate soullessness, but can also happen all by itself, which is an allergy to the words "the end." The end is an incredibly powerful pair of words. When you sit down to write a narrative and you've got a very specific message that you want to get out there, something that you want to deliver to people, something you're passionate about and is meaningful to you, you probably will sit down, at least if you're a planner like me, and you'll have an idea of where you're starting from, where you're going to, and why the road to get there is important. And once you get to where it is you're going to, at the end of that journey, where you've taken your audience with you to understand how the characters have gotten here, why this matters, why it's relevant, the passion that you wanted to bring across, you get to the end and you close the book. You finish and you've satisfied the audience at that point. That doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be a happy ending, but it will have some kind of satisfaction and resolution in the narrative coming to a close that you intended to tell. Sometimes those narratives can be expanded. Sometimes you can do a prequel, sometimes you can do a sequel. Many times, if you've done your world building really well, like we're trying to do with Choral, you can go, okay, that narrative is finished, now I will tell a new one in the same universe. But the words "the end" are so important to deliver to your audience, because they are the close, the full stop, the underline that completes the experience that you've asked them to give you their time and money for. And when you write the end, you've normally got a enclosed package that means something and will be treasured by the people that it resonated with. With the MCU, it's very clear that Endgame was where the end was supposed to happen. And after that, everything that came next was, well, this will make some money if we keep going. And then you hit the photocopier syndrome again, where you're just photocopying the photocopy of the photocopy of the photocopy, because you're not trying to be creative and tell a new narrative or bring in these passionate, emotive things that are leading to a new the end. You're capitalizing on something that's popular. And because you're coming at it from a less passionate and involved position, it again cycles you through that whole process of just going through the motions and not really saying anything. And that also then goes towards the oversaturation, because there's now just too many superhero movies. So the original question was, how do you break out of this problem? If you want to write a vampire story during the height of Twilight, you're going to have difficulty, because the expectations are out there that you're going to be writing something that's within those same parameters. The publishing houses of the day, I mean, I've always had a specific vampire book in my head. I've never finished it. I've never managed to read it, because the things that it's based on keep changing, and it's a whole thing. But I do have this vampire book in my head, and I started writing it during the height of the Twilight craze. And I knew at that point that if I did write that book, if I did get it finished, one of the most pointless things I could have done at that time and place with what I was writing was submit it to one of the big six publishing houses. And that's not even to go into the fact that I was a more junior writer at the time. It wouldn't have been as good as something I write today. Even if it had been the best piece of literature I would ever write in my life, if I had tried to submit that story at that time to the big six publishing houses, they would not have published it, because it's a vampire story that is not following the current zeitgeist. We're not interested. We are risk averse. That doesn't mean, however, that it wasn't worth me writing the story. One, I wanted to get my ideas down, and I had something, and still have when it finally comes out, unique that I wanted to put onto the paper. And that's where you break away from the problem, is you have to sit down and not go, I'm going to write a vampire story and it's going to be better than Twilight. You have to sit down and write, I have this message that I want to get out there. The medium that I'm choosing is a vampire novel. And you start doing your planning. You sit down and you think about, who is my target audience? What is the message that I want them to walk away with? What are the themes that I'm going to weave through this? What are the character arcs and interactions that I want to mix together that will aid in this journey, so that when I get to the end, it feels complete and satisfying? And when you sit down to do that, you might perhaps go, well, I want to do everything opposite to Twilight, and that would be fine, and you could, start working those things together. And as long as the ideas that you sit down to work together make sense and you can form a narrative from them, you're good. You can go off and write it. However, if you end up with what I would personally do would be to look at, well, why do I want to write a vampire story? What is it about vampires or zombies or superheroes or whatever your thing is that you find compelling? What makes you want to write a story using these tropes and ideas and shorthand and exploration of the human condition, whatever it is that you're doing? What is it that you find compelling about that? And for me, I often come back to the reason why I'm so obsessed with vampires, why they've always been part of my life and something I like to read about and engage with, is because I read Dracula when I was quite young and I really enjoyed it. And when I sit down, I can do the same thing with writing that you do with art. When you are impressed by a piece of art and you want to incorporate some of those awesome things that you've seen into your own work, you sit down and you do a master study of the art piece, where you try to replicate it, or replicate some of the techniques or the colors or whatever it is that you're interested in. You attempt to replicate it to understand how the person who did it made that artwork. And that then gives you access to the techniques and the experience to start incorporating it into your own work, and your own spin will come on it. Writing's exactly the same. You can sit down and look at Dracula and go, why does Dracula work? What makes Dracula good? And with Dracula, there's a lot of moving elements, some of which are sort of under the surface that you don't notice unless you're really paying attention.
Pet redeem.
Pet redeem, I will pet the Ceres as she is on my
Also,
hip.
for the interruption, what is a Dracula?
Dracula works because he digs through the ditches and burns through the witches.
Hell yeah, brother.
Dracula was a work of genius. It looks a bit tired now, but only because so many people copied the tropes that Bram Stoker created. It's also genius for things that aren't tropish, and I'll get to those in a minute.
I mean, on that observation, if you go back and read The Lord of the Rings by modern standards, they are built of so many tropes and cliches. But then you have to sit back and realize that most of the cliches that you see in Lord of the Rings were created by the Lord of the Rings rather than utilized.
And as we know from the last couple of streams that I've done, cliches and tropes are not the devil, that they are not wrong. They are tools in your box that, if used correctly or subverted correctly, are very powerful and do belong in your work. But Dracula, part of the reason why Dracula works so well is its format, its concept, and its delivery. So the format of Dracula is really interesting because, of course, it's a whole series of recollections all put into a single narrative that you follow through. And the reason Bram Stoker did it that way is because it allowed him to potentially reveal certain things out of turn, which allows you to have dramatic irony with the audience. It allows you to understand the emotional state that certain characters are in because they do or don't have certain information yet, and that allows them to resonate with you. And it also makes it more real because that's how things work. When people are communicating with each other, especially about something scary or a tragedy or an ongoing current event, it tends to be quite muddled as that event unfolds. And it's only really in the postscript, when we look back at something that's occurred, that we're able to dissect it and put everything into a clinical, chronological order to understand factually what happened. As a thing is happening, it tends to be a lot more muddled, and that's much more human. So choosing to use the journal style allowed Bram to bring that across in his narrative. It also allowed him to play with the narrative voices that you're hearing. It allowed him to bring all of the narrative voices into sort of a narrow band of being similar, because when you're writing thoughts down, you tend to be a little bit more thoughtful of the words that you use, your pacing, the way things are written out, than you are when you're talking. In talking, you'll use a lot more adverbs than you do when you're writing, for example. And of course, the time and day that this was written in allowed you to... the way people wrote back then was all sort of aiming towards this rather intellectual standard, even if you're not doing intellectualism. So you end up with a narrative voice that feels very similar the whole way through the book, but each person's entries have these slight twists on them that's the voices of the different characters. You know, Dr. Seward's voice versus Mina's voice versus Jonathan's voice, but they're still within this band that feels similar. So the delivery is really, really good. You also had the fact that Bram was bringing in new technology for the time that he was writing, which for us now, going back and reading about it, it's old technology we've moved on from, and that can be a very cozy feeling. It's sitting in that era where science was in a different place than it is now. So that makes Dracula being read today somewhat cozy, whereas of course being read when it came out, it made it quite cutting edge, which is a unique thing as well. You've also got the fact that Dracula isn't the main focus. He is the reason that things happen, but you're not following Dracula every minute of every day. You're following the different heroes. You're moving between Mina and Jonathan and Dr. Seward and Van Helsing and Quincy, and you've got all these different moving pieces, and Dracula is the recurring thing that just keeps happening, that drives the plot forwards, that drives those characters from thing to thing to thing that you're following. So Dracula's basically a force of nature in it, which makes him feel very powerful and evocative. Contrast that with Edward Cullen, who's just kind of always there and not usually driving the plot that much. what plot there is in Twilight. And Edward just doesn't have a presence. He doesn't mean anything. When I think about Dracula, I think about wolves and rats and primal creatures. I think about him crawling down the wall of the tower, being this inhuman thing in human form, his presence looming over everything, his personality and how it squashes Jonathan down while the two of them are in the castle together, and how Jonathan slowly comes back into himself once Dracula is removed, but is forever changed by him. You don't get any of that with Edward Cullen. So these are all the elements that are worth looking at if you want to write a vampire story because you're inspired by Dracula. You're not going to look at, oh, it needs to be a teenage romance, and, you know, I need to make sure somebody who's attractive gets bitten on the neck. What you're looking at is what are the compelling things that stay with you long term? If you're writing for a teenage audience, it's fine to write a teenage love story that has vampires in it. Vampires are inherently sexy. It's something that we've sort of come to. It's a visual and verbal shorthand at this point. That's fine. But it's not going to be the deep literature that you can get from really doing a master study of the genre as a whole and the things that personally inspire you. And that would be how I would break out of the problem of the Twilight issue if I was still trying to, you know, do a book during the Twilight era. I would want to write something that I knew I had a strong theme, I had a strong message, I was calling back to the things that make me compelled by vampires, and I wouldn't try to go through one of the big 6 publishing houses because that's just a fool's errand. That would be the time where it would be interesting to look into personal publishing, on-demand publishing, never vanity publishing, because that's a crock, don't do that. And it's also where you'd want to make your connections on the ground floor. For those of you who were here last night, Numeric Workshop had a really unique stream that I was blessed to be part of, where we had Mo on the floor at Adepticon talking to 2 artists doing the Artist Alley over there. That's the sort of connections I'd be looking to try and make if I was trying to break into the industry with a very tropish, topical thing in current day where I wanted to be doing something unique. I would want to be out there mingling with the readers, being at potentially a publishing show house where you have agents approaching and looking at different works people are putting out. But I would not be trying to submit a full manuscript to a publishing house because it's just going to end up in the trash because they're risk averse. And Ed Gauss has just brought up the next thing that I was going to mention. He says, Andy Weir originally published on the internet chapter by chapter. That's the other way to make a good connection directly with your audience and just circumvent the commercialism of these sorts of problems. Put your work out there in a place where you can directly interface with the reader, get direct feedback from the reader, and build your brand that way. And of course the hope is that, you know, your work gets recognized and gets far enough that the publishing houses pay attention and give you a better shot than they would do if you effectively just cold called them at the worst possible time. I hate to say this, but for anybody who's familiar with the After series, which is also another terrible series of books. After is a relationship series with an incredibly toxic and dangerous relationship in it that I despise down to its core, that I think has its own movie series now. That got picked up from Archive of Our Own, AO3. One of the publishing houses happened to see it on there, see how popular it was with the audience that was reading it, and that's how that author got picked up. It's terrible writing and was in keeping with what was coming out at the time, but that's the sort of way that I would say you need to try and break away from this. Another thing that was said yesterday by Charles Ubrecht whilst we were talking with him was he was talking about taking the opportunities that are put in front of you, which I didn't say anything at the time because Charles was so eloquent in explaining everything he was telling us last night. If you weren't here, I'd strongly recommend you watch the VOD from Numeric Workshop yesterday. But one of the things that he said was about taking opportunities, and that resonates with me because that's how I got here. When Tex was doing the Hunchback video, I was approached by some of the members of the Legion who knew that I was learning art and going to art school, and asked if I could draw a hunchback and a locust cockpit. And at this point, I had drawn precisely 0 mechs in my life. I was 2 terms into my art school, with mecha not even being covered until term 7, and I didn't know if I could do it, but I said that I would try. And literally everything that's happened to me in the last 2 years, and my presence in the Legion, and all the cool things I get to do with you guys, all the fun stuff that's happened in the last 2 years, came from going, I'll try, and making that piece. So one of the other things that you sometimes have to bite the bullet and do is say, I know this story is good and I want it out there. Now's not the right time. I'm going to write it, I'm going to put it on the shelf over there, and I'm going to come back to it in a couple of years. And right now, I'm going to write something that isn't the current zeitgeist, something truly unique that the publishing houses, or however it is you want to get your stuff out there, is more likely to be successful. And once you've built your audience and you've got people to trust you, and you've shown that you have a good provenance, that you can do the thing, that you have something to say that's compelling, well, then you can break out your vampire book and go, hey, by the way, did you know I wrote this before I did anything else? Here's my vampire book. Buy it and enjoy it, and then people will. So that's my opinion on that topic, and there's half an hour gone. How was that? Nope. Nope.
Also, I just realized I'm not transmitting.
Yeah, it would help if you were transmitting. That would definitely help.
Tex was not involved in any of the process that got the ball rolling. Like, that was...
I mean, he was tangentially involved because he made the Hunchback video, but yeah, Tex had no idea I existed at the time that I did the Hunchback piece.
Yeah, it was, let's see, Hal's, Squick, Cocainium Rob,
Parallax,
and Parallax were all working on wanting to do like a little audio short to build hype for the Hunchback vid. I got involved with it, and then I posited the question of, I know an artist. Do we want to try and make it a video instead of just audio? At which point I poked the missus here. She volunteered, and then, you know, that's all she wrote from there.
Yeah.
And it's the weirdest quarters. Also, this reminds me, we've said it in the past, but one of these weeks we need to have basically cliche day. Just discussing.
We do need to have a cliche day, and that would be fun. And yes, talking about dragons and undead will get conversation going. And actually, that brings me back around to another thing that I could talk about with that. So we've talked about undead, zombies are the same, and oh god, I'm so sick of zombies. For me, zombies aren't compelling because they don't say a whole lot to me. Once you've seen one zombie movie or read one zombie story, you've pretty much kind of gotten the message and the theme that most people are going to bring to you. That's not to say
there's an intruder in our midst.
Is there? Has he slid in?
Somebody has slid in.
Hopefully everything is working, and everybody will be able to hear our companion presently.
Well, they haven't said anything
yeah,
yet.
He's getting his
so.
headset. So for me, zombies have never been particularly compelling, but that's not to say you can't do something unique with it. There is a book out there called Hater, who I can't remember who the author is, but Hater is a zombie story with no zombies in it, and it's really good.
Hater was written by a man named Silky Johnson. He was Hater of the Year 2012.
Not the same one. Hello, Halzakar. How are you?
Hey. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Halzakar of the Black Pants Legion.
Anyway, I'm sorry I disrupted your train of
You're
thought.
completely fine. How are you doing today?
Hal's is tired.
Oh, mood.
But tired is when the tired is when the creative inhibitions seem to drop.
Yes, tired or slightly
You are
inebriated.
not wrong. You are very not wrong.
There is a famous writing thing that says to write drunk, edit sober, and yes.
If I ever get drunk, I'll try that.
Oh, you should. You'll have some wonderful ideas just come pouring out of your brain when you're drunk, but you absolutely need to go back and edit them when you're sober and throw out the ones that are just nonsense. But there'll be some good stuff in there. It's very worth it.
In any event, what can I do to try to contribute today?
What is your favourite kind of literature, Hauserkar? What do you like to read?
So, all right, this is going to be... I'm going to answer this instead by referencing some of my favorite books. But, and I need to preface this with the fact that graduate school beat the concept of reading for recreation out of me for like 10 years.
Yeah, that's something that
just-
drives
Schools
me
are-
nuts.
Schools are tragically good at doing that.
One
Yeah.
of the things
So-
I consider to be a good thing I have done in the world is there have been multiple people I've managed to get back into reading recreationally, and I feel that is a benefit to the world, but I hate that the school system beats it out of people.
So, I started reading as a preteen, probably just barely. I started reading The Wheel of Time in like 1992. And I rode that sucker
Excellent.
all the way to the end. And I still go back and read it because I'm like, oh, right, this ties to, like, I still go back and make connections to it and
A really
realizations
good book,
and stuff.
a really good book or a good movie or whatever will have those things where you go back and read it, you're like, oh my god, this was foreshadowing for that and I never realized, or oh, this is really clever, or oh, this relates to that, and it
So-
has, and it becomes very cozy. There are certain books I read every single year because they're just cozy.
So, just as an example, it took me entirely too long to realize that in the Wheel of Time setting, the Aiel were genetically engineered to be basically Captain America level physicality. Why? They were peaceful people. They did the growing. They grew the food for everybody in the Age of Legends. So they were like, well, let's do this for them so that they're more. And then they turn into the Aiel that you see later on. It's like, oh my god, how did I never put that together? Other things I like to read. The only book I ever read, I had to read for an assignment in school that I really, really enjoyed. I'll get to that one in a minute. The other book series I really enjoy is the Dresden Files, because Wheel of Time is big and thick and epic, and Dresden is snappy and quick and fun, by and large. So I get some brain candy and I get some brain fiber. And then the other one, the book
Does
that I read
brain
in
fiber help you make a brain dump?
Well, I'm saying fiber because it takes you a while to digest it. And then
Fair.
and then the book from school that I enjoyed was To Kill a Mockingbird, because Atticus Finch to me is like, that dude right there is a hero. And even if, he doesn't ever shoot anybody. He takes one shot, and you hear that he was that good, but he takes one shot to protect people from a rabid dog. But that's not the heroic thing he does. That's just something that happens that alters his kid's perception of him.
And that puts you at very big opposites to me, because I hated studying that book in school, and the reason why is because I had a terrible teacher. I think if I'd studied that book under a better teacher, I'd have intelligent and insightful things to say like you do. Instead, all I can say is, oh my god, I hate that book.
Well, I get that. I had to read Lord of the Flies for senior English, and I hated it. I hated it. The reason I hated Lord of the Flies, everything. It was trying to be so dense in symbolism that I just gave up because I didn't care anymore. This is symbolic of this is and I'm like, I don't care. Oh god, this is going to be a weird way to reference it. Wrestling thing, believe it or not. There were these guys who were doing this bit as quote-unquote the fashion police, so they would do these backstage skits parodying law enforcement related shows. And they did a Twin Peaks one. And at the end of it, it's got the other people who are in the skit standing there doing, like, one of them's holding the piece of wood and pouring syrup over it, and then the other one's like throwing shredded paper in the air and all that sort of stuff. And the other guy who's not in it goes, "That's too much symbolism. There's too many symbols. I can't keep up. That's too much symbolism." And I'm just like, yeah, that's what that. And that book was so staggeringly nihilistic that I kind of hate it anyway. Because I can't enjoy something if I don't have somebody to cheer for. And what did they do? Is they straight up killed two of the likable people and tried to kill the third one, and it was so oppressive to read that I hated it.
So what you're talking about there is something you can get in every kind of creative work, which is desensitizing the audience to the stakes.
So
Go on, love.
I've actually got one about that, since we were talking about oversaturation. A story that touches on multiple things that got brought up that I really enjoy. It's called Worm. It was a web serial story released by a dude under the online handle of Wildbow, and it is a superhero story that has a point to make, which is what kind of world would we have to live in to make superheroes and supervillains make sense? Like, how would the world have to function for them to make sense in the first place? Which was a very interesting way to break away from the usual superhero genre, for one. In a lot of ways, it's kind of reflective of The Boys, but not as commercialized.
Okay.
It was released episodically online, again touching by the how do you get your work out there to be known and noted, but also giving the opportunity to really connect with your consumer base, your readers.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you just described, Hells, TV Tropes calls it, I think, darkness induced audience apathy.
Yep,
And
that's the term.
that is the downside to that story. Worm definitely does that, because it's not so much that it kills off the likable characters like Lord of the Flies does, but what it does is it keeps moving from freaking bad thing to bad thing, and never gives the characters a chance to breathe, that
Yeah.
eventually you just get desensitized, because, like, oh, what's the escalation this time?
Yeah. Um,
I really enjoyed it, but after a while it starts to get to the point where it's like,
It's because
okay.
your brain is
Yeah.
kicking in a very natural mental defensive system that we have. You can't care about everything forever when there is no reciprocation from it. You need to have that satisfaction, you need to have that relief, because otherwise you're just going to get hurt. And that's how you end up in depression spirals, and it's why the current trend of media that's there to just make you angry, I really do think is a plague on society, because it's not good for your mental health. And that
No.
apathy that you develop towards it's all bad all the time is your brain protecting itself and protecting you and your personality, so that you're not attributing weight where there will never be any reward, any growth, any development, any positivity. And yeah, it's something you have to avoid in writing. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like what happened with going way back. What happened with Dallas is people quit watching Dallas whenever they killed Patrick Duffy's character, because he was the only one anybody liked, and it's just like, wow. And then they did the "It's All a Dream" poll. Sorry, spoilers.
Which
Oh,
is
I hate
such
that
there's a
one.
reason why writing teachers
Such
tell
a
you not to do
cop-out.
it. You can
I think
use
they
it
were
if
the
you use it well, but you have to be so aware of what you're doing, because if you use it as a cop out, it's just as bad as going with whatever you did originally.
right. So stuff that I enjoy. I mean, honestly, just sitting here looking, I see two full shelves of comic trade paperbacks, because look, the world sucks. Okay, it just does. All around us, the world sucks. The world is broken, and if I want to enjoy reading something about people who are gifted with exceptional abilities doing exceptional things to help folks, that's a nice escape for me. That's I enjoy that. It's good to see. It's like, hey, that's
Escapism
fun.
is a very valid point of
And
creativity. It's incredibly valid.
it's not even, I don't even necessarily think of it as escapism. I think of it as, like, just, it's a contrast.
Yes.
And would I think that if that was a real thing, we would have as many heroes as we did? I don't know. But it also frustrates me because then you have, since comics by their nature are long running, you have people step into certain roles that they are clearly ill-equipped for. People who are like, oh, Superman's boring, so we're going to do this. And it's like, you don't understand Superman. That's not what that's about.
I
Or
personally find Superman kind of boring, but that's because he doesn't have anything that speaks to me personally going on with him. That doesn't mean that people who do find him valid or, aspire to be a good person because they read about him, that doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's completely fine.
I'm in a soapbox for just a second. You
Go
okay
for
with
it.
that?
Yeah, go for it. This is
Good
a ranting
Superman
stream.
stories.
This is sequence for ranting, so.
Good Superman stories are not about Superman. Good Superman stories are about Clark Kent doing things while he's wearing the suit. And therefore, what people get is like, oh, he's too powerful, he can't be stopped, all that sort of stuff.
100% agree.
Clark Kent is a good-hearted, good-natured farm boy from Kansas who grew up, canon, believe it or not, grew up in the Methodist church and didn't really come into his powers until he was about adulthood. So he had loving, caring parents who raised him to be a good person. And when he developed powers, they were like, this is something you need to do to try and help people. And so what happens is they're like, well, if Superman was so powerful, couldn't he just do this? Like, no, he can't. This is going to be rather specific, but please pardon me with it. I once heard a pastor answer the questions like, can God create a rock so big he can't move it? And his answer was, no. The people you're posing that question to would say no, because you are insinuating that this is something that would be acting against its nature. He would not do something that was that kind of dishonest, and you're trying to impose that, oh, Superman did this. It's like, that's not who Clark is. And Clark struggles with the right way of handling things, even though he ends up punching stuff a lot. And what's the right way to do it? There is a great, I've got it somewhere and I'm not sure where it is, but there was a lead into this arc where this little girl had gotten picked up, kidnapped off of Earth as part of something. And the Green Lantern Corps are going out of it, the Green Lantern Corps are going after it, and there's some other, extraterrestrial heroes that are involved, maybe the Dark Stars, I'm not sure. And he's talking to his dad, and he's like, Dad, they say they'll handle it. And his dad goes, they probably could. He says, yeah, but they always said that Superman was their favorite. And he goes, a lot of kids are. He goes, there's so much going on. He goes, yeah, there is. He goes, but I feel like I can't let this go. And his dad just looks at him and says, so what are you going to do? He says, I'll see you when I get back, Dad, and just takes off. Like, that's a Superman thing.
So
it's not.
The stakes with Superman are emotional stakes. And
Yes.
this is where we can tie to other media that does this well as well. And then that's where the good Superman stories are. Harry Potter does this as well. When you pick up Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, you're pretty certain that by the end of the book, Harry Potter's going to be alive because this is the first of 7 books and his name's on all of them. So you know he's not going to die, but the stakes are still really high in the first Harry Potter book because he's a young boy going through formative experiences. The stakes are emotional. How does this impact who the character is? And those choices to do the good thing, even when doing the wrong thing would be so much easier and no one would blame you for it. It's the shopping trolley problem, or not the shopping trolley problem, but the shopping trolley test. If you do not return the shopping cart, no one's going to yell at you for it. You're not going to go to prison. There's not going to be a fine. There is no negative to just leaving the shopping cart wherever you want to. But a good person takes the shopping cart back. And that's Superman, that's Harry Potter, that's your positive characters that you're reinforcing, and you have to carry that across. And a lot of the bad Superman stories either over-focus on just the power stuff and what you were talking about, or take it to mean that, if we're going to put in emotional stakes, then Superman must be evil because of this. And no, that you've approached the
Why-
problem from the wrong direction, and we're in the same
So-
place.
So this is going to, and I'm going to bring in a completely different medium now, but one that is also applicable, because there's a lot of discussion that I've been participant to since I first started playing TTRPGs
Mm-hmm.
back in the D&D 3.5 days of the Paladin as a class.
Uh-huh.
And you know, there's a whole lot of pro paladin, anti paladin, you know, sentiment, because you find people that find the alignment restriction very restrictive, because, well, lawful good means you have to basically be the Boy Scout. You can't do any of the fun things, because then you'll get slapped with the Paladin Falls, loses class abilities. You get the other people who go hard into the, well, how about I just play Deus Vult Paladin, because the people on the Crusades were Paladins. They weren't nice people, but they were doing what they were raised to think of as both lawful and good. And the thing that I've always found about the Paladin is that more than most character classes, is it is rewarded by having a player and a game that caters to the concept of the emotional stakes rather than just the, you know, stat block or what have you. Because, I mean, I can point out a couple characters that I stand by as paladins in media. Father Alexander Anderson of Helsing, raging maniac, utter berserker, lawful good paladin, hands down.
Here, my favorite example of a paladin, and it's not even in fantasy literature. Well, no, it is. I'm sorry, it's in a subset of it. And this is me going back to something I said earlier. My favorite example of a paladin is Michael Carpenter from the Dresden Files.
Yeah.
Because Michael Carpenter is a paladin, straight up, no question. Michael Carpenter is the guy. Oh, look at that. Verganthian found the Fashion Files link.
Yep.
Michael Carpenter is that guy. Michael Carpenter is the guy that goes out into the night and fights the darkness, but why is he doing it? He wants to give them a chance to change who they are, to redeem themselves. And when they don't, he doesn't want to, but he has to take them out. And so
Yep.
but who is, that's not who Michael is. You go through these books and you learn who Michael is, and what I get from it is people are like, oh, paladins are boring because they're, and I'm like, have you ever considered what someone who chooses that life would be like? Because
Go
like,
on. Go on.
what is someone who's choosing to be a part of this, choosing that I'm wanting to protect the downtrodden, I'm wanting to learn to do this sort of stuff because my faith in this thing is enough that I feel like it is my duty. Why do you have to immediately assume that this person is an asshole?
So, okay,
Why
go
is that the knee-jerk reaction? And I don't.
And the answer is
Maybe it's
because
just
the
me.
trope that's
Maybe it's just me. I
entered-
don't get it.
The trope has entered the cultural zeitgeist that's what that means, and that's why you have to break that trope, break that stereotype, and show the other side, show something unique, show the human connection, have a message and a theme and something that you want to carry over to your audience. That's what you're seeing in the Dresden File. It's what you're not seeing in people who are playing a paladin with no creative thinking behind it. They're playing surface level, whereas Mr. Carpenter is written as a full person with a consideration to his circumstances, his personality, what he does for his living, the impact that the people and things around him have on him. One is just better written than the other.
And so the thing, I mean, I could go on about a concept that I have learned of called the ethical asshole, as far as, being the paladin who is a bit of a jerk, but ultimately is still the Boy Scout, where sometimes you need the person to be a jerk for the right reasons. That's the person that's going to hold you accountable for when you screw up, for example. He's not going to sugarcoat it. He's going to slap you with the, you done fucked up. But if it's an ethical asshole, they're not going to then rub it in your face. They're going to turn around and then take that as the, now this is how we do it better. But I mean, the big thing, and there's a character that comes immediately to mind for where I'm ultimately going at it with the paladin mindset, which is Ramza Beowulf. For those of you who don't immediately know the name, Final Fantasy Tactics, or its re-release, War of the Lions, originally for the PS1, re-released for Android, for mobile and for PSP. Highly recommend the game. Extremely good story writing, very fun characters, and the thing that really sells it to me as far as Ramza, the main protagonist, goes, is he is what I would describe as the archetypical paladin character, because he is in a world where there's a lot of political fuckery going on. It's a civil war for succession in a medieval kingdom, and even the people he looks up to are dirtying their hands as part of the wrangling. In many cases, they're doing the evil deed, but for what they perceive to be a greater good. And Ramza does what I love about playing a paladin well, and what honestly I think an excellent Superman story is where instead of a binary decision of do good thing, but there will be potentially bad consequences, or do bad thing for good consequences, finding the third option instead of do good or do bad. It's find a way to resolve the problem, oftentimes at personal cost, sure, but take the option that nobody else is willing to, nobody else can, because nobody else has the conviction to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But not in the way of, I have the conviction to be a fucking douchebag when nobody else has the balls to. No, 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 no. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about I am willing to sacrifice myself and my well-being to make sure that the best outcome happens, while not doing so with less than good means. And
Yes.
the best Superman stories are where the impossible situation is put in front of him. There's an old Green Tech story, again, going to the Paladin thing, where the Cliff's Notes version is they're interrogating a cultist because the cult's about to do the big doomsday plot, and they need to know where the ritual's going to be. And the party starts torturing the guy. He's tied to a chair in the back room of a bar, and they're starting to beat the fuck out of him. The Paladin, he's disgusted. He walks off. He's like, I'm not going to be participant to this. They beat the shit out of the guy. He doesn't fess up or anything. Paladin comes back, clearly had a few in him, puts the Stein down, and then proceeds to tell the cultist, hey, you're going to tell me everything you know. And the cultist spits it back in his face like, you're a paladin. You can't do anything to me, or else you get robbed of all your powers. I know about you and your order and your god. You have nothing. At which point, the paladin kicks the guy in the chest, the chair falls over, straddles him, and proceeds to explain in extremely graphic detail the fact that he will personally violate every oath he holds dear to save the world, and he will burn in hell doing so, but he's going to drag the cultist down with him if need be,
Mm-hmm.
because he knows what the cost of doing the right thing can be. And the way he describes it is he's not fearing losing his powers. He looks forward to the day he finds something that he's willing to give it all up for.
Or it's the
Which,
journey of I'm willing to give this up, and then later I will atone because this
yes,
was worth doing.
yes. It's why I find Captain America such a fun and compelling character when written correctly.
Well,
And
it's a hell of
yeah,
a caveat.
yeah, no, the Captain America is the Marvel equivalent to Superman.
Yeah.
Frankly, the physicality of what they do is not important. It's the man behind the mask and showing how they are able to navigate all of these scenarios that would allow a lesser person to do some shit and then come out with their honor intact and their conscience clean.
So, if, for what it's worth, if I had been reading, or if I had been writing that scene or playing that character, and the paladin comes back, And he kicks the chair over and he leans down and looks at it. Or he doesn't kick the chair over. The paladin walks back in and he says, "You're going to tell me." And the guy's like, "You aren't going to do nothing, all this." And the paladin leans forward. Like, if this. Yeah, and I'm going off the top of my head. No, the paladin leans forward and the guy's all beat up and the paladin does lay on hands and goes, "I'm sorry that nobody ever cared enough about you to value you for who you are. I'm sorry that you had to go through and find a life with these people who want to do so much harm to find a place to belong." Like,
Yeah.
you tell me how some like that gets used occasionally, like the good cop bad cop thing, but you don't nobody ever does that with a paladin. Like, a
Yeah.
paladin can be both a righteous ass kicker but also be a really nice guy, and I don't see that much. It's like,
So I've got a movie for you then, if you haven't already seen it. There's a character in this movie that I think kind of hits what you're describing. Have you seen Kingdom of Heaven?
no, I've never watched it.
Okay, first and foremost, if you do watch it, watch the director's cut. It adds a bunch of content that makes the rest of the movie very different in
Mhm.
a very positive way, because it adds a lot of context. Like, how the fuck does a blacksmith from France know how to make siege weapons and use them?
Uh-huh.
There's a scene explaining early in the movie that he was a siege engineer for the local lord, as an
Okay.
example. Orlando Bloom is the main character, who I also would describe as a paladin, an archetypical paladin character for a lot of similar reasons to what we're discussing. But what you just described, I'm gonna have to look up the character's name. He is the knight hospitalier that is. He comes riding in with Liam Neeson's character as his advisor, and he very much is a knight
Mhm.
and a warrior, but also he is that gentler healing hand like you just described.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't think he actually has a character name. He is simply known as the
Are you,
Hospitalier.
Bloom? TV Tropes names him as Balian.
No, I'm not talking about Orlando Bloom. I'm talking about the Knight Hospitalier that I'm referring to.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
What you just described is that character. He's a supporting character, but he very much fits the wicket that you just described.
Okay.
And he does a fantastic role.
So a lot of what you two have just brought up through going through all of that is it's proper character exploration, development, and presentation and character arc. Which, when we get far enough with Shoal that we actually start writing a book together, which we're some way away from that, but we are going to write a book at some point, chat. We're going to go in depth into how you do that. How do you build characters where you can have these long-reaching arcs and all these different things that interact. If we had the time, I'd have a whole conversation about, where the problem the cultist represents in the story Aiden and House have been talking about, where that can provide a pinch point, and the issues of playing character off of character and thought process off of thought process. However, it is 4 o'clock and we do need to do some show today.
I will
Because
make
Fair.
go
I'll make one last observation.
Go for it.
Hal has already responded in text, but Orcslayer, I would not call the Punisher a paladin character
No.
on the basis of the Punisher is he is explicitly acknowledging that he exists because of the failure of the law. The paladin would, in the face of what has happened to the Punisher, he would seek to bring the villains to justice, but he would also seek to change the law that allowed his tragedy to happen. The Punisher is what happens when you have somebody with all of the capability and conviction of you're right, the conviction of a paladin get pushed too far. He is no longer a paladin. He may have been in his previous calling, but he is no longer that. Is my opinion.
Um, the Punisher is like the superlative version of hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
He's just hurting people that you agree should be hurt.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong there. Anywho, that's my last little 2 bits. So
Yeah, I do want to move over to Shoal because I did a whole ton of work on it today that some of you may have seen, and some of you were chatting with me in the Orcs. Als, if you want to hang around for this, you're welcome. If you want to jet off, that's fine as well. Whatever suits you. But we are going to move over to some Shoal nonsense now.
I appreciate coming in, but I need to go look
Go.
after little ones, so I will
Say
talk to you all
hello to the
later.
Halza kids from us, and I hope you have a
We will
wonderful
indeed.
afternoon.
You all have fun.
Thank you for joining us. Alrighty. Choral. So, last week we did a ton of conceptual work, and there was ideas flying left, right, and centre over this very core element of the setting that we're building. And I've been thinking about it all through the week because I said I was going to do a write-up and try and bring all of those ideas together so they'd make sense. And I was thinking about it all through the week, and I had different ideas, and then I'd read something that another one of you had said, and it would change things, and I'd go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So it wasn't really until this morning that suddenly everything all clicked into place, and that's why my brain has dribbled out of my ears. So what I would like to do today is to do a look at what I wrote up for the choral, see what you guys think about it, and then I think I need your help to pin down the specific choral variants within the groupings that I've written, if you guys are on board with that. I don't have a specific prompt right now, Lichter, because that's one of the things that I want to figure out is what some of these chorals look like. So if you want to draw a choral of some kind, once you hear the initial bit I'm going to read, maybe that will become one of the chorals that we're going to just finalize today. I don't think we'll take another voice to bounce off of at the minute. I'm just going to push through what I've got. Also, you're not transmitting, just so you know.
oh, I keep forgetting that I turned my mic
But
off,
that's
so I'm
okay,
not
because
echoey.
now I'm going to do a whole load of wittering. So, choral overview. I'm going to read out directly from what I've written up, and then we'll see what you guys think of it. So, the initial choral overview. Unique to Shoal is its choral, a series of choral offshoots notable for the psionic power built into each beautiful structure. Choral is the meter of Shoal. It resonates with the harmony of Shoal's star system, drones the background hum of the day song, and facilitates the construction of titans. Physical description. Choral looks very similar in shapes and colours to other corals found on Shoal and also on Earth. Each is a dense, vibrant colony of organisms growing with time to form immense reefs, or at the very least, parts of a reef. Like Terran coral, coral forms calcium carbonate skeletons over time. Like Earth's reefs, Shoal's coral and coral come in a variety of sizes, based on the manner in which they trap nutrients, the space around them, and the external pressures of the weather and currents. Coral is easiest to tell apart from its more mundane counterpart, however, by the crystalline structures found in each variant, amid the more common structures. It is these unique elements which seem critical to psionic potential, though the crystals will not work on their own if removed from the rest, and they emit Coral's enchanting, haunting psionic hum. Coral has multiple different types, but all of them are intricate and elegant. For deeper sea corals, this elegance may be hidden within a protective outer shell, but if one knows where to look, all coral bears patterns in its shape that seem almost like an ancient script. The more extensive and aged a coral colony, the more refined and deep the song it generates, and the more certain patterns of script growth seem to repeat across the reef. Colonies of coral can stretch for miles, either by themselves or among other corals on Shoal's Great Reefs. See below for detailed descriptions of each coral and where it's found. We'll get to that shortly. How do we feel about that very initial summation? Coral everywhere and not a song to hear. I'm imagining a pom-pom crab waving coral around instead of anemones. That would make sense. I'm going to make a coral crab with ferrocrystal basic structure. I like that. That sounds great, Lichter. But please do. All right, I'll keep reading and we'll see if there's some feedback in a minute. So, growth. Coral is still something of an enigma. Its growth is fundamental to life on Shoal, and some things are known about it, though not always the why of certain facets. Coral grows at different speeds depending on the biome it calls home. For those organisms which seed in more gentle waters, for example, it may grow fast and wide, colonising swathes of suitable reef bed. Fast-growing coral, however, tends to have a far lesser psionic potential than its cousins, possibly because the smaller, faster growths lend themselves to smaller crystalline structures, and the song is produced by quantity rather than quality. Other slower-growing corals, such as the polar branches or the deep-sea corals, have larger crystal structures in their pattern and over time develop a much more deep and solid psionic song, often with a greater projection range. Strangest of all is the rare corals that grow where Silesians live, requiring some facet of this race that as yet the shoaly people have not isolated or replicated for mass agriculture. On a more normative level, coral also needs the basics of life. It cannot survive without water periodically, though periods of air exposure do not seem to harm it, especially if part of the coral is still submerged. Coral also requires a textured seedbed on which to adhere and germinate, and the usual gamut of nutrition in the form of phyto and zooplankton, though some corals are capable of entrapping small fish to enrich their diet. Finally, all coral seems to have a psionic dependence on the greater song of shoal. Coral removed or isolated too long from the background hum of its cousins withers and dies, meaning that even those rare titans that have escaped shoal's atmosphere only do so for measured periods. Psionic potential. It is unknown exactly what causes psionic activity on shoal, and the people who live there have as many theories as there are stars in the sky. Perhaps it's linked to radiation, perhaps to faith, perhaps to some nutrient in the water as yet unclassified. Whatever the case, coral is universally psionically active and a primary evolutionary force on shoal, producing the psionic food much of the ecosystem descends from. Coral is the fundamental meter by which life on shoal measures time and anything approaching a circadian rhythm as humans know it. As shoal turns on its own axis around Luastra, the song of the coral across the moonworld fluctuates in its background hum. While not so specific as to allow the measure of a minute or a specific hour, all shoaly people know roughly when in the day they are based on this background white noise only psions are able to detect. For life without psionic potential, the song of the coral is still critical as their life cycles are often synced to life which is psionically aware. Coral may also be responsible for the development of sapient life on shoal. Underwater existence comes with a host of unique challenges, some of which are made far more manageable with psionic ability. Whether through convenient communication, reliable navigation, or predictable nutrition, coral rewards advanced thinking, all the way to the present-day development of titans. The titans, shoal's answers to the most extreme challenges of life on the moon, are entirely dependent on the coral in their construction. A contained system of coral song carries information very efficiently, allowing a single individual to command a complex machine of moving parts, tools, thoughts, and overcome dynamic challenges with ease. Specialised units, which combine multiple pilots, are capable of even more, working in tandem in ways humans encounter only in computing. There is also the consideration that titans are the end goal of the coral itself. While the growths do not seem to have the speedy thought processes of sapience as most know them, coral has often been considered to perhaps have its own goals and desires. Through the titans, coral is taking its first forays into interstellar exploration, and this might just be something it wants. I'm going to pause for a minute and see what chat has to say. Ironic that I'm drawing stylized coral ATM. We'll add the script to it. That sounds great. I'd love to see that, Eric. I see I've come just in time for coral. Yes, you have, Tired German. Welcome back in. If any of you have any thoughts, do drop them and we'll go from there. I will keep reading in the meantime. We'll see what we think. Age and timbre. Timbre. The age of coral is often measured by the people of shoal in terms of its timbre and range. Young corals are often referred to as sopranos, with a higher and sometimes thinner voice in the psionic song as they get established. Over time, a coral will progress deeper in range through alto, tenor, baritone, and finally into bass. The time it takes an individual coral to reach this maturity varies by species and by life expectancy. In the shallows, where rough water can wear a coral down, it isn't unheard of for some species of ponds corals to only ever reach tenor before being considered in old age. Meanwhile, some polar species start at tenor as polyps, and if given enough decades or even centuries, they form some of the most basal notes of the entire song, felt inside a scion's very bones. Reproduction. Coral shares much in common with its mundane counterparts in how it grows and propagates. A primary way for each coral to spread across shoal and ensure the continuation of the reefs is by asexual reproduction. In this process, coral that has reached a certain threshold size for its species makes use of periods of bloom in the water to grow new polyps that are exact clones of itself, which then drift on the ocean currents to find new places to bed down and begin to grow into a full coral all their own. This form of reproduction is the easiest and most efficient for many corals, so long as they can reach the right size. Once they have done so, polyp spawning is an act that will continue through a coral's entire lifetime. An important secondary reproductive type exists as well, however. In order for coral to evolve with shoal and survive the changing seascape it calls home, all coral can also spawn using the usual arrangement of two sexes and a commingling of genetics. When the currents, nutrients and radiation levels are right, corals prepare to spawn in a mass event. This is often signified by a change in the very coral's colour and composition as they take on and produce the gendered necessities to create new life. Fish often gather and school around reefs building up to a spawn, even coming in from open water as the depth of the song of shoal deepens. When the moment is right, all the coral release eggs and sperm at once to maximise the amount of planulae created. Some fish aim to consume this bounty for nutrition, while others respond to the psionic call of the coral to form currents that encourage the gametes in the water to meet and create a new life. As with asexual production, the success of these new corals depends on the currents as they are carried away to find suitable spots to bed down and begin to grow. Okay, let's see if chat has anything to say. I saw a video recently that explained that we don't actually know how a wing creates lift. We have a number of theories, but they all have problems. Nonetheless, we have managed to build all sorts of aircraft without knowing the exact whys. The Shoaly would be similar with psionics. They don't understand exactly why, but they have managed to make things work anyway. Yeah, and that's a natural part of advanced logic and thinking. One of the great things about being a truly sapient species is the ability to use placeholder thoughts to bridge a gap, to sort of finish an experiment or an exploration. And if you don't understand how that placeholder thing works, you can write that down, but if it's reliable and dependable and replicable, you can still use, we don't know, but this is how we can use it to continue on with your scientific discoveries. I love the horror element for coral having its own desires. Yes, I like that that's just sort of a kind of background fridge horror thing. Love that the coral is wanting to see what happens in space. Yes, yeah. I can't remember who first brought that concept up, but I love it. It's a really good one. See what else we got. I wish I wasn't driving. I'd love to talk about coral. I'm glad you're just here listening in, if nothing else, Doctor Who, and you can always drop any thoughts that you have into the Orcs if you don't get a chance while we're on stream. The channel over in the Orcs, I do pay very close attention to it. I always natter to people over there. If you have ideas and you can't get them out while you're here, or you're watching this as a VOD, please come over to the Orcs and talk to me. I will listen to your thoughts. Cultivated crabs snip buds of coral and plant them at all sorts of places. Yep, that would be another way for the corals to bud elsewhere. Would there be a variant of coral that is in shallow enough water that it would be exposed to air periodically with the tide, and how would that affect its growth and effects? I think that's something we should definitely look into. I don't have an issue with the concept of coral that occasionally has air exposure. Does a later chapter talk about the types of coral? I jumped in later, so I might have missed it. We're going to get to that today, Tired German. Bear with me. I want to work through the rest of the overview, and then when we jump into where I started detailing that, you'll see where I need the help from you guys and what we're doing with that. So let me flick back over and read the agriculture part. We'll keep going. Agriculture. With the importance of coral song, and of course the corals used to make titans, it is unsurprising that the Shoaly have worked to learn how to farm coral. For some species, such as the resilient ponds corals, this is as simple as giving polyps a suitable manufactured bed on which to grow, and ensuring enough nutrients to let the structures blossom into fruition under ideal circumstances. This has led to some colonies of coral boasting a lineage that has served the Shoaly for generations, purely to serve as titan internals when mature. For other species, the necessities to allow them to flourish in controlled conditions can extend to needing to also breed and maintain partner species, some of which become a part of a titan's maintenance cycle. Some corals, particularly the bronze variants, have not yet successfully been cultivated in captivity. For corals such as these, harvesting techniques to make sure the host coral isn't overtaxed are critical, as are harvesting rights in the zones they may be found to prevent overpruning. For the bronze corals, this also includes needing extensive safety measures, as the null silence produced by an attacked bronze coral cluster can have life-altering consequences. A final challenge for farming coral comes in making sure it has access to the song, as coral removed from it for too long withers after going off-tempo. Excuse me. Predators. Like all life forms, coral has predators. It could be said that the shoaly themselves qualify, as they harvest and farm the reefs for both the species that live there as well as the coral itself to create titans. Most shoaly, however, are symbiotic. The coral is as much cared for as it is exploited, with a careful balance maintained in a majority of regions where shoaly and coral interact directly. This is not the case for other species, however. Colloquially known to the shoaly as the silence, there are three major predators of coral: the absence, the doldrums, and the quiet. Of the first two, each is an algae-like life form that drifts across the ocean until it encounters coral psionics and hones in on the source reefs using small harpoon tethers to attach to surfaces. Once in the presence of a coral, both the absence and the doldrums reproduce rapidly while consuming the crystal content and psionic energy of its victim, enshrouding the coral in sticky grey matter. For the absence, this process breaks the coral's connection to the song and ability to hum until it is dead. The absence will then spread to other corals, potentially devastating a reef if no predator or protective species culls it in time. When attacked, the absence releases a cloud of spores to travel the currents and begins the cycle again, before allowing itself to be consumed by the reef's protectors. For the doldrums, its process of engulfing a coral is more insidious, as it utilises part of the psionic energy it eats to generate a creative emotive field to discourage predation and let it eat in peace. This means doldrum-infected areas are not silent, but rather grim and depressing, as the algae enforces negative mood and disconnection around it, driving other species away. Thankfully, the use of this energy means the doldrums spread much slower, giving time for those predatory species as are immune to psionics to consume it, or for shoaly harvesters to move in and cleanse an afflicted area. The quiet is somewhat different, however. Unlike its algal counterparts, the quiet is a species of animal similar to a saw-toothed caterpillar. These creatures travel in a swarm that sticks together by biting into their siblings' thick hides and securing themselves in place with a tacky silk until the colony drifts into a coral reef. Once there, the quiet disperse over a chosen coral and begin to eat it down to its crystal layers, where they then lay their eggs and fertilise them before returning to the currents. When they hatch, baby quiet feed on the crystals of the coral and of course the psionic energy generated around them, vastly reducing the song of the coral as they mature towards adulthood. Reefs infested by quiet might show no signs for months until a whole swathe is suddenly hushed by the birthing of hundreds of babies all at once, and some reefs never recover. Naturally, the shoaly are always on the lookout for these problems in the reefs they tend, and doubly so where the titans are concerned, as the mechs are not immune to infestation and complete destruction from these tiny forces of devastation. How do we feel about all of that? Let's see what you guys have had to say. I need to scroll up just a little bit. Forest coral. Coral that manages to get to dry land, tries to go up as far as it can, seeking to meet the sky. I don't know how viable that would be, but certainly we can make some mechs that can fly and maybe do that. Do you need help, Red? I always need help. What the frugal drugal is coral. It is our unique thing that we have on the world that we're building together. Magic meth might be one way of putting it, but it is our secret ingredient that lets our underwater setting make giant robots, effectively. Neon SeaWorld Evangelion, something like that.
Oh my god.
Would some coral be like the mythical mandrake plant? It unleashes a lethal scream when uprooted. Keep that thought in mind, Wilf. That's in the next section. I have some thoughts. Lictor loves what I did with some of his ideas. I'm pleased to hear that. This is all great. I wish I had more feedback. The fact that you like it is feedback enough at the minute. I'm really, really glad. What system are we building for? What we're hoping to do, Zork, is once we fully flesh out our setting, which we've been building from the ground up. We started with what the solar system looks like. Once we finish building our setting and our compendium that explains everything, we know that we're going to try and write some stories in it, and we're possibly going to try and write our own TTRPG system, because we have some people in the Legion and the Orcs who have done that before, and hopefully that will be something that we explore over time on this stream slot. Bully Snake says the quiet is the silence at the end of the song. Yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be some lore that springs up around the 3 silence species that Lictor suggested last week and I fleshed out. And I'm sure if nobody else does, Eric will latch on to that, because he's been doing some wonderful work with faith and mythos. I don't know if we need coral that menaces the heavens. Love the coral eating critters. Maybe there could be groups that use those critters to get rid of rebelling groups. Absolutely, that would be something to think about. And as I say, we're going to have so much to play with when we get into culture, which I thought we would be doing this week. Probably going to be next week. Right, let me move on to the next section, because some of you are coming up with the same ideas I did, and I want to see if you like how I applied them. So I did start working on coral variants. As stated, coral is not merely one type of coral found in a single biome on Shoal. It is instead a unique series of organisms with a unifying psionic makeup that take advantage of multiple habitats on Shoal. There are 2 main ways the people of Shoal classify the corals across the moon. These are by their biome or by their use in Titan production. Below, both these factors have been taken into account in listing known coral types. And of course, we know that we're going to use the idea of the different tone ranges, like tenor, alto, soprano, etc., to talk about age of the corals. So we have taken that into account, but it's not going to appear in this section because it's not relevant to the descriptions that we're looking at. So the first type of coral, I've settled on 4. We talked last week about maybe having up to 5. Then we talked about 3. I settled on 4, and I think once I explain them to you, you'll understand and see why, and hopefully you guys will agree with my logic. We will see. So our first type are going to be the mechanical pons corals, so named for the nerve cluster in the brain that's to do with balance and eyesight and a lot of physical things that we need to process and move in the world around us. These corals are integral to the limbs and body of a Titan, as their resonance is best suited to transmission from Titan to pilot and back, all information that allows for motion and dexterous control. In the wild, pons corals tend to utilise their psionics to mesmerise small species into protecting their reefs in exchange for shelter in their branches and domes, with aged pons corals capable of directing entire shoals of fish. And then what I'd like to do, because I think the pons corals will be one of the most versatile and easy to find across Shoal, I'd like us to define some abyssal pons species and what they look like, some in the deep, some in the shallows, and some in our freshwater lakes. The next type I felt we should have are the persona bronze corals, so named for the bronca region or whatever it's called in the brain that's to do with formulating personality. So these are going to be our special, rare, unique corals that we use for Titans to have their brains and personalities and ability to think and connect with a pilot and understand on that sort of human personality kind of level. So these corals are the most rare and sought after corals on Shoal, as they are the only species capable of waking a Titan up with a voice of its own. Bronze corals give a Titan its unique personality and ability to bond with a pilot as their own entities, as well as instilling a sense of curiosity and learning. It takes a mix of these corals to make a more advanced Titan, as a chorus of different species is needed to give the Titan a breadth of personality and intellect all its own, using coral to simulate sapient brain function. In the wild, bronze corals only grow in Salatian territory, the deep polar regions, or at the heart of very old and expansive reefs. Their psionics are truly unique, as a bronze coral will often bond with a partner scion from the local environment to protect it and see to its needs, and use a devastating null pulse to deter aggressive invaders. Bronze coral is often responsible for froth when encountered in the wild, a psionic sickness caused by sudden or repeated null pulses that cut a shoalie or a titan off from the song. This sudden silence can induce horrible disorientation and existential dread in a shoalie, with repeated exposure sometimes entirely burning out a victim's psionic connection. As a result, bronze coral is considered highly dangerous, yet it is this very risk factor that allows each advanced titan to protect its thoughts and pilot from external psionic influence. Interface or pari corals, so named for the bridge in our brains that allows different parts of our brains to communicate with each other. Pari corals are the critical conduit between pilot and titan, allowing the systems and thoughts and motions of one to make sense to the other and for titans to fulfill their purpose. Pari corals are used in the interlinked devices and cockpits of a titan to conjoin the pons and bronze corals with the pilot, hopefully without the personas of either being lost or disorientated. Any deficit in pari-coral alignment or health often leads to pilot desynchronization, which can result in anything from motion sickness to full loss of independent sense of self, making these corals some of the most crucial to maintain and carefully position. In the wild, pari-corals often exude emotional fields of calm or intensity to both warn further reaches of the reef of danger and to meter the pace of the other life forms living upon the reef. And then our final type that I came up with from what we talked about, this was the fourth one that I thought we needed to have, are the memory or temps corals. Obviously that name's taken from temporal. Temps coral is a specialised coral that can be found in nigh any reef bed in at least small quantities, and is only used in some titans. It is responsible for memory, with only small amounts being needed in worker titans to remember the skills each mech needs, but expanded in scope for more advanced titans. Temps coral innately bonds with other corals and grows easily in most environs, nestling itself among its brethren. In the wild, it seems to do much the same job as when utilised in a titan. It remembers. New coral beds without a temps presence are... Excuse you, babies! They have opinions.
Oh my goodness, they are curled up in a small dog bed together, just playing the laziest game of Bitey Face.
And the noisiest game of Bitey Face. In the wild, it seems to do much the same job as when utilised in a titan. It remembers. New coral beds without a temps presence are often slow to react to threat, even if encountered before. Once temp species begin to propagate, however, the coral seems to settle into the flow of its environment and respond quicker to threat, also to bounty and external stimuli. That's the four types that I thought we would need to make this work, and I wanted them each to have a natural ability in the world that explains why they even exist in the first place and what they've been adapted to the Titans to do. So let's see what you guys think from everything I've just read out. Why is my brain going full Gurren Lagann? Because Gurren Lagann's great. I'd say
Row, fight the power.
quite. I'd say that the doldrum and absence are both very useful to explain cycles of death and rebirth, rather like forest fires. Yes, that absolutely could be a thing, Lictor. That's a really good thought. Silence is already a part of the aspect of cold water, another of which is death. Excellent. So that will all fit into your mythos building you've been doing brilliantly. If you ever want to put all of that into a doc, so I can link it in the orcs and people can find just all of the mythos stuff in one place, please do so. I would be very happy to do that. A Inquisition for the coral based off of the silence types. Ooh. Spiritual SeaWorld Evangelion. Wonder if there is a coral variant that eats the choir a la predatory plants. Possibly, or maybe there's a mundane coral species that does that, because if it's mundane and lures them in and feeds off of them, it doesn't have to worry about them trying to feed off of it in turn. But that's certainly something we can think about. Bronze are obviously brain-looking coral, and they grow in nodules that are embedded in other types, often descriptive by their bonded creatures. That's certainly, yep, that was certainly one way we could take this down. one path we could take this down, and we can always have several different ways of detailing bronze corals. We don't have to have just one. We can have, you know, bronze corals in the abyssal depths look different to the ones in the shallows, or the polar regions. Bronze corals are rare, so it's going to be polar, old beds, and Salatian territories. Maybe they look different in different places, and we base some of their looks off of different brain structures from different species. We know what a simian brain looks like, what a human brain looks like. Maybe we look at a bronze coral type that borrows from octopus brains, which are a ring. We can definitely play with that. Yes, the big coral. The big coral had much to say. Memory coral is quite important for self-healing and repair systems because they can remember the original shapes and allow direction of other growth into certain templates. That's a really good idea, and it would probably also make it a really good idea that for our coral singers who build the Titans, maybe the tools they use have Temps coral built into them, so that their tools help to remember the shapes that they're making, and that helps with our consistency on our mass production. Let me pop that note down because that's a really good note. I do have some notes from last week that I haven't fully integrated yet or figured out how to best represent, so I am keeping all the notes that haven't been integrated yet. Maybe coral singer tools also use Temps coral to help with standardization. Okay, there's that thought recorded. Let's see what else you guys have had to say. Could there be naturally occurring feral titans, like a 1 in a million occurrence that the coral grows just right? So we don't have that at the current, and that's something that maybe chat can weigh in on, but we do have one particularly unique titan that operates in that way. Going back a few weeks ago, we came up with Benny, and I'm going to put Benny on screen because Benny is very special. Benny is a commemorative mech, and also our first mech of the setting that we designed. An Orcslander passed away a few weeks ago that I personally knew and was just a wonderful, vivacious personality on the planet. And we have made a mech in his honor with permission from his wife to represent him and carry on his quirky shenanigans legacy. Benny is a Furin mech who is an older type of mech, who was one of the first that was designed, and he was the first of his line, so he bears the name Furin, as well as that being his class. And his pilot is a hermit crab named Benny that crawled in there one day while Benny was being decommissioned and absconded with the entire Titan. The two have bonded. Benny now roams the oceans, causing acts of chaos. He turns up when he wants, he changes his shape, he adds panels, he takes them off. Nobody knows how he does this, and he is a force unto himself. So we do have Benny that's kind of fulfilling that niche. Alright, let's turn Benny back off again, and we will continue reading what chat has to say. The bronze corals could be harvested by a class of untouchables who are born with no psychic potential at all and are therefore immune to its effect. They would be deaf to the song and an outcast caste that are vital to the economy of Shoal. That's an interesting idea, and I think that's something we'll need to vote on whether we want to do that. Once I catch up with where chat has got to, I'll put up a poll for that. Let me copy that thought down so I remember to do so. Alright, let's see what else have we got. Do we have some sensory coral types, or is that covered by the ponds? I figure that would be in the ponds type, tired German. Perhaps there are certain ones that are better for that sort of thing. You know, some of them are good for muscle actuators, some of them are good for end effectors and being able to detect texture and temperature, but they'd all be within the ponds family. So the coral have an active response to the world? Yes, coral in the real world, to a certain degree, have an active response to the world. They're a slow species to react, but they do react to it. And I do think we should have that echoed on Shoal as well. I know there is a bronze actively attacks, but do all coral have similar mechanisms? We can figure that out, and perhaps we get specific where some don't, some do, within the bands that we're talking about. Also, it sounds like coral is typically found together, not so much being individual organisms, but different casts of a single species. Yeah, I very much see Shoal as having these very large coral reef beds, and that the beds themselves will be adapted to the environment that they're in. and that coral grows alongside normal coral without the H. And I feel like because of how important coral is and the ecosystem is to the sapient species we've developed, I feel like a lot of their culture when we get to it and their city building is going to try to be non-destructive of the reefs, because the reefs are so critical for things that they need to make their lives easier. So that would allow for the reefs to expand and not be restricted by the industry of the people that live there. They're going to have to overcome their problems in other ways. And I know people in the Orcs have been talking about floating cities and all sorts of other ways that life can happen. Excuse me. That will allow us to have these grand reefs. Give me just a minute. I need to have a drink. Oh, that's better. It's almost like ranting for 2 hours in a row dries your throat out or something. Okay. Yes, him crab. Him very much crab. Benny the chaotic fella. We got a Benny situation underway. He's munching the coral down here again. Yeah, that would be a very Benny thing to do. I would say that naturally occurring coral reefs are a smorgasbord of different coral types. Cultivated reefs are more monopoly. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's how it would work, yes. Would anti-psionic weapons be treated like nuclear weapons in our world? Probably. And I think if we're going to go with anti-psionic weapons, if they're built off of the bronze corals and their null field, which only the bronze coral creates, and we've already made the point that bronze coral is rare, that could mean that it's very like nuclear weapons, where the material that you need to be able to make it is not exactly something you can just, pop down the street and purchase. So that might work really well. Let me copy that thought down so I've got it for later. That is a really interesting concept there. And of course, we'll come back to that when we talk about culture and technology. So I'm going to shove this into my technology notes section for now so that we don't forget to talk about it when we get there. All right, let's go back to here so I can continue with where we're at. Is synthetic inorganic coral a thing? No. We don't have at least we have not decided that we have nanotechnology yet, because we haven't fully broached the technology spectrum. We're working our way towards that, but I have a feeling that that's probably not going to be on the boards. We've been trying to be, really careful with building around the coral being the really special thing on this setting, so I don't know that synthetic coral. Perhaps there is some degree of synthetic coral, maybe without the H, normal corals that allow for more extensive agriculture. But we'll have to see what chat thinks about that as a whole. And once again, if anybody has joined recently and you're not aware, we do have a channel over in the Orcs where if you have ideas, I pay attention to all of them. Maybe there's a doomsday cult that worships the quiet, seeing the coral as an abomination. Could very well be. If you want to write up some thoughts on that, Zork, you're very welcome to do so. I'm sure Eric would get a kick out of it, and if you don't, Eric probably will. This would be predicated on understanding how coral works. I could see humans trying, but I don't see them succeeding. Yeah, well, I think we'll have to have a real think about that when we detail our technology section. I like the doomsday cult idea with the silence and its types. Yeah, I think having a doomsday cult would be really interesting. Humans would have nanotech, methinks, but it would be carefully regulated. Yes, and wouldn't necessarily automatically apply over to being able to do things on Shoal, because Shoal is weird. Alright, so that's me caught up with chat. I said I was going to do a poll for the bronze corals and the idea of untouchables. So the comment that was made was, the bronze corals could be harvested by a class of untouchables who are born with no psychic potential at all and are therefore immune to its effect. They would be deaf to the song and an outcast class that are vital to the economy of Shoal. So what we're looking at there is, do we want to have Shoaly, some of our Shoaly peoples that we've designed, who are nulls or blanks or whatever we want to call them? I'm going to put that up as a poll and we'll see what chat thinks. So give me just a second to do that. honestly, my personal opinion, I'd be fine either way. I can see making it work either way. Should Shoal have untouchables / blanks? Yes. And they are revered because they can gather the coral. Yes, and they are outcast. Or no, we should not have. We will not have additional votes, so you'll only get to vote for one of these, and we will make this a 2-minute poll. Start. There we go. Let me know what you guys think on this while I catch up on some more chat. Maybe bronze coral has internalized a form of the silence in strange symbiosis that's similar to Lichni? Excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Where the psionically corrosive element of a doldrum makes the bronze grow hyperactive. Essentially, the reason the bronze is so hard to grow is because no one has figured out how to make the silence and absence fuse with coral without the mutation and changes explode into a reef-wide problem. And maybe that's where something to do with the Salachi biology that we know helps. Maybe that's where that comes in. Okay, let me pop this in under our bronze corals as a thought that we need to see about fusing in and see if that makes things make more sense. The Silent Church, also called ... does focus on cold water, but they aren't necessarily a doomsday cult, more like how the cult of venerated Isis above the others. Cult of Isis venerated above the others. Yes, I want blanks and nulls. Sounds like seeds of a class revolution. They are called the tone deaf or the deaf. I'm thinking that having the coral deaf is a good counter to the corally gifted. Okay. I think blank should be much like we view the blind deaf, in my opinion. Lichen. Lichen. You mean lichen. Okay, that's my mistake, Lictor. Lichen, I know what we're talking about now. Looked on with pity rather than revered outcast. Okay. Are there psionic dot zones where psychic energy can't exist? We had talked about there being, it's one of the leviathans that we're going to write up. One of the oldest coral beds has a null zone around it. And also probably has a lot of bronze coral within it. And because it's drawing in the psychic energy to fuel itself and what it's doing, it has a null zone around it that is going to take some effort to get over. So we definitely do have at least one dead zone. I think they are not revered in a religious way, but held to a separate from society, the way some societies keep their mythical leaders separate. I like the ideas that you guys are coming forward with that. So that they're revered in terms of that they're special and they can do something that's unique, but there's also a degree of perhaps pity that goes there because they can't hear the song. The blanks can be kind of like lepers, but since their condition isn't contagious, they're not ostracized. I think we're just going to give them their own sort of unique position in society that comes with a lot of complex emotions around it. They're great because they can harvest bronze coral for us, but also they're weird because they can't hear the song. And how do you live like that? It looks like we're sort of looking at that sort of thing. And it could be that means that perhaps they're highly paid, which allows them to get well positioned in society materialistically, but perhaps that also means that it's really hard for them to establish long-lasting relationships because people find them very strange because they don't have that psionic connection. And perhaps that then also brings in the whole thing of, is this person in my life because they actually care about me for me, or are they just here because I'm rich, or whatever, and that makes it a more complex thing that we're looking at. The cult was starting this mainly because those who are completely overwhelmed by the songs to the point it's painful and debilitating. Yes, and so one of the things we've talked about, Zork, because I don't think you've been here for previous streams that we've done on Shoal, one of the things that we're going to be detailing at some point is we came up with the idea that there are psionically active oysters which make pearls that boost one's psionic resonance and psionic ability. But if you take too much, One, it can burn out your psionics. Two, it can overload you. So perhaps the Doomsday Cult also takes a lot of its members from people who have abused the psionic pearls that we know we're going to be writing about. So that could be really interesting as well. It should be detrimental to the blank's health. What, being a blank, or what specifically should be detrimental to the blank's health? I'm not entirely following, and that's probably because I'm overtired. And I want to make sure I get your idea down correctly. Oh, I'm going to have another sip of drink in the meantime. Okay, so just being a blank is detrimental to their health. So but perhaps they're a little bit more sickly and their lifespans aren't quite as long. Oh, and we are closing in on the end of our stream slot already. Okay, let me pop these thoughts down. So we have said that yes, we will have blanks. They are helpful to society because they can harvest bronze coral, but they are also considered strange as they cannot hear the song. They also tend to be more sickly and shorter lived, and harvesting bronze coral is thought to also lessen lifespan, though no one knows for sure. We'll leave that little bit of mystery in there. It'd help if I could spell the word sure. Alright, we've chewed through the time that we have today way quicker than I thought we would. I swear, whenever I'm trying to do something creative, 60-second minutes become 30-second minutes and time goes far too fast. So I think what I'm going to do, I'd like to detail some individual corals in the subsections that we've set out, because it seems you guys are on board with the 4 types. So what I would love, the PDF that's linked in the Shenanigans announcements channel has all the current details written up, so you can read what I've read through to you today. You don't need to go back and access the VOD. You can access the PDF. The information is in there. If you guys would like to suggest to me over in the orcs some coral types, so what I'm looking for is which of the 4 types of coral is it? What type of water does it grow in? So is it from the abyss? Is it from the deeps? Is it from the shallows? Is it fresh water? Is it tidal where it gets some air? What does it look like? And if you've got specific colours that you'd like it to have, let me know that as well. And then we can slot those in, and then maybe next week we can vote on whether we like them, what ones we want to keep, whether any of them need to go, whether we keep all of them, and we'll detail our corals that way. So if you guys are willing to pop over to the orcs and lend me some more of your brain power over there, and I'll also add a few of my own in through the course of this week as well. We will have stream next week where hopefully we can review all of that, and perhaps we start looking at our tech tree or our culture. The week after that, for the next 2 weeks, I might not be able to stream because I'm expecting to be on the road, but I'll talk to you guys a bit more about that next week. Thank you so much for all of the input this week. As ever, you guys are creative geniuses. Shoal would not be what it is without the fact that so many of you contribute to it and help to moderate my excesses as well as lend me your own. And yeah, I think we've got something really, really cool that we're coming towards here. There's one thing I want to show you, if I can go and grab it before I disappear off. And there's also one other thing that got discussed last night that I want to talk to you guys about as well, now that I'm remembering about it, that might happen. So, for any of you who weren't here last night, again, watch the VOD for Numeric Workshop from last night. It was really, really cool. But we were talking to a lovely lady called Lisa Sells, who does physical sculpting. She does terrain for D&D games, modular terrain. She does amazing sculpts, and she knows our very own Mo of the Black Pants Legion. And it was posited to her that perhaps once Shoal's compendium is complete, we might be able to commission her to make us a sculpture of something from Shoal, which I think would be incredible, especially with the skill set that she has. So if you did not catch yesterday's Numeric Workshop stream, it's very worth a watch, and I think some cool stuff will come from it. I'm also going to pop over to my Discord now, because I didn't grab this before stream, and I'm going to dig through. Here we go. This is going to be what I want. Will OBS let me drag and drop this straight on? Yes. Okay, it's over the top of everything, but hopefully you guys will be able to see that. So, Parallax has started doing a thing. It's still in progress, and of course I haven't finished the art yet for this to be finished, but Benny shall in fact live. We are going to have a Benny. All right, that was the two big things I wanted to show you guys before I cleared off this week. Eric is saying I'll do it after the choristral once the 4 choral subscriptions are up. Yep, the stuff that I read out today is already in the PDF. If you want to go and take a look at it, Archon Erica, it's over there. What channel is the Orcs can I post ideas in? Let me go and grab you a link. The auxiliary, general shenanigans, copy link, and we're going to pop it over here. There is a link to the channel in the Orcs. If you look at the pinned comments, there is a pinned comment that will take you to the resources channel, where you can find the PDF with all of the information of the ideas that we've come up with so far. Alrighty, we are at 5 PM, which is the end of my stream slot. To the best of my knowledge, we will have Text and Depth this week. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. I know last week they were unfortunately unavailable, and I think you guys got cursed Zenith stuff. I'm not sure, or it was the week before. To the best of my knowledge, they will be joining you guys, and I will, of course, see you guys at Weekend's End on WBPLW. Have a fantastic weekend. Thank you for starting it with me. I hope you have creative juices flowing, and if you put anything down on the blank page this week, or this weekend, if you overcome the blank page, I am incredibly proud of you, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. I will see you in the Orcs, and that's me for this week. Good night, everybody.